MOON. That spells run, because that is what Tom Cullen had to do today. What's up, everybody? It's your twisted woman here, Chauncey K. Robinson, and I'm here with my co-host,
MOON. That spells Michael Damian.
And we are doing episode 6 of The Stand. We are more than halfway through the mini-series of Stephen King's epic novel, The Stand, and we are in episode 6. Things are happening. It's called The Vigil. So much went down. I'd like to thank everyone who is joining us in the live chat today, and all of you who are joining us in the replay. Thank you so much. It's been such a cool journey so far, talking about what has been a promising series, but still with some, give and take, but also some epic moments as we got in this episode 6. We had Nick blown away, Mother Abagail and Flagg face off in the woods. Harold is exposed by Franny. That was a big remix. Tom on the run with the dead bodies. Oh my gosh. Trashcan Man appears. So we had a lot that went down, and we have a good amount to talk about. And as we usually do, we're going to do talking about the episode itself. Then we're going to do the differences when it comes to the show and the book and the 90s miniseries. And then we're going to do our favorite game, which is which character did you identify with most? So I want to pose that to you all in the live chat, and also those of you who are watching in the replay. Think about it for when we get there. Which character did you identify with most in this episode? I feel like with this show, we probably want to do which character you were the most repulsed by, perhaps.
A little bit.
Yeah. So, when it comes to this one. And so, there is, hey, Poltergeist, thanks for joining us in the chat. Yeah. So we have a good amount to talk about. So what were your initial thoughts when it came to this episode, Michael?
Wow. The ball is rolling. It is a fan. We're pretty much, if this is a 9-episode arc, we're pretty much gearing towards the point of no return. And I think this one really kicked it off with a bang.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my overall thoughts, I thought it was very action-packed. Like I've been saying, episode 3 has been my favorite episode in the season thus far, but I feel like episode 6 was definitely where I got the feeling that this was an epic kind of show finally, because I wasn't feeling that before, when it came to this. Episode 1 was kind of quiet. I felt like it was kind of disjointed because they were a little bit all over the place. And then I felt like episode 2 was so. And I thought it was kind of lopsided. I was like, is this what we're going to get? A whole bunch of flashbacks. And then episode 3, I finally felt the heart of things. And then I feel like with this episode, it was kind of like, okay, things are a turning point. But even then, I'm not going to say it's too little too late, but I definitely feel like, okay, we're getting somewhere now and things are actually turning and building. I just wish that we had more of a connection with some of the characters that these things are happening to at this moment. And I feel like that had been somewhat lopsided when it came to this show thus far, because Nick died, and we'll get to that, but I had some feelings about that and how that played out. That is kind of unfortunate, given this character is kind of one of the hearts of the series. So I think overall we both very much kind of agreed with it. We both was vibing with this episode.
I liked where the characters were. I thought up until a point, some characters even seemed more redeemable than they did before, and some came out on top more so than others. We're allowed to just talk about what happened in the whole episode, right?
Yeah, no, we'll go through it. We have different segments, so let's jump into it with each one. Okay, so the first thing, let's talk about what was going down in Vegas. I think Boulder, it was it's all other drama, but Vegas, Flagg is still trying to find out who the third spy is. We saw Dana, poor Dana, who everyone seemed to love. in the last episode, gone far too soon. She died. She killed herself, so she wouldn't have to reveal Tom. She gave him the note, "Are you in? Run." And he basically, we got planes going overhead, y'all. They are also involved with the stand. So we had that going on. And then it seemed like in this episode, Tom was able to figure out what the note meant by one of the random people that were there. And he found out that it was run. So, and also Judge Ferris died. She was also killed by Teddy. So.
Yeah, it was really unfortunate. And I thought we were going to watch the judge die on screen, but I'm really happy we watched her die off. Because we kind of knew when she grabbed the gun, she's in the Vegas hotel room or on the outskirts in the desert somewhere. Yep. It was really unfortunate. Like, yeah, it's not going to end well for her at all, because you could tell by the way Lloyd was talking about, like, all of his friends are trigger happy, so you may not get the best results.
Yeah. And I kind of felt like that was anticlimactic a little bit, because we heard about Ferris being on the outskirts of town. She grabs the gun, and then the next scene we see her in is basically her dead in the body bag. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. We couldn't see like some epic shootout with this awesome woman and who kind of risked her life to do this thing. And I don't know, I think that's how I felt about all of them kind of being sent on the spy journey. I feel like we're seeing Tom's epic thing. And as the Poltergeist are saying in the chat, rest in peace, Dan. I think her, we got a lot of focus on her last episode and she died. And then with Ferris, Judge Ferris, it was kind of like we get this shot of her in the hotel room and then she's dead. And the next thing we have, but it gave us that awesome scene with Flagg, and I think his name was Teddy.
Bobby
Terry.
Bobby Terry.
Yes, it gave us that epic moment with Bobby Terry and Flagg, where we really got to see Flagg's power play when it comes to why people are so afraid of him. But I did feel like it was a little anticlimactic that Judge Ferris died so quickly and off screen in a way.
Yeah. Like, why? I was wondering from a writing perspective, like, why did they hold back with her? Was it because
they show everything else?
Yeah, was it because of how old she was? But it was weird. You would think with this one, with everybody banging, everyone doing drugs, no, like, spared at no expense of whatever vice you have, like, they show it. And we can't show an elderly woman dying off stage.
Or epically with the gun.
Epically. Yeah, she's the judge. Like, she almost was going to go down like a Wild West bandit. Like, okay, I got this. And then nothing.
Yeah. No, it's kind of weird. And then what happens is Bobby Terry, who basically shot Judge Ferris and then tried to play it off like, oh, she was shooting me, it was my life or hers. This was the moment where we got to see Flagg's life, like how he does what he does. And I appreciate that. I thought that was an epic moment.
Yeah.
He looks at Bobby Terry, and he can see into people's minds. He can kind of reflect what they're doing and things like that. And then basically he says, "Are you sorry?" Because he knows Bobby Terry is lying. He knows Bobby Terry basically shot this woman and didn't have to take her down. And so we get this moment when Bobby Terry is real brave for all of a second, where he gives Flagg, of all people, the middle finger, and he runs out. And I thought that was probably one of the most epic, scary scenes of this season, of this series so far, in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought the whole Bobby Terry, and then the thing I love the best is as Flagg is going full Satan on Bobby Terry in the elevator, I love the fact that these depraved criminal types making out, doing drugs, looking like the beach, like any South Florida beach you go to, like that just looks like a South Florida club that Vegas has turned into, where everyone's not wearing anything. And then all of a sudden, oh, blood. Okay, I'm not on board with this. What's happening here? What? This guy in a casino called Inferno is going to shed some blood? And it was like, wait a second, I got to get out of this. I thought that was just a wild ride.
In a way, it was, and I agree with that. In a way, it felt like a lot of people were finally, maybe some people were finally seeing the extent to Flagg's power in this regard. I mean, he didn't just kill this guy. He basically ripped out his intestines and his heart. Yeah. And it was like, how does this dude do this? Like, you kind of have to wonder what people are thinking, like, okay, who really is this guy at this moment? You know? So I thought that was a good moment there. It was probably like one of the highlights to me of the episode was that moment. We got a little bit more supernatural with it because I felt like, you know, we got super supernatural in episode 3, and then it kind of fell off in episode 4 and 5 a little bit, and then it was like suddenly no, and then like episode 6, like they went all out with the supernatural. And I'm like, this is what they should have been leaning into the most. Poltergeist saying, you guys are turning Bobby Terry into a meme. Yes. Like, no, there were some memeable moments this guy. Like him smoking the cigarette. I mean, honestly, the way he strutted into the casino, I thought this was going to be a big character. You know, they gave him the focus. I'm like, okay, who's he supposed to be? You know, and then he goes out that way.
Yeah, you can tell Randall Flagg is having a hard time because the guy, Bobby Terry, is literally wearing a biker jean jacket, and on the back of that jacket says Nomad. And that you can clearly tell by Bobby Terry's jacket that Bobby only works for himself. And you can tell maybe internally that Flagg is kind of losing his grip. Because how did he not know that Bobby Terry was going to turn on him when his jacket literally has Nomad on the back?
Yeah, and I think you're pointing out something very interesting there, that it touches on a little bit of the shortcoming of Flagg, right? And we'll talk about that when it comes to him in the confrontation with Mother Abagail, which revealed some truths about both of these powerful characters and maybe some of the insecurities and some of the faults that they have, which I really appreciated. So, but we saw this epic moment, and then someone says MOON, and Flagg puts 2 and 2 together, and he was like, where is this Mr. Moon? And I honestly, you know, because they have been remixing stuff, you know, not to talk about the book too much, I'm like, okay, Tom's not supposed to die right now, but I don't know what they're doing in this series a little bit. Like, they're very true to the book, but at the same time, they have remixed some stuff, which we'll talk about. And so I was afraid for Tom for a little bit. I was like, how is he getting out of here? Did you worry for a moment that we were about to lose Tom Cullen?
I really did, because like Tom is definitely a smart guy in his own right. And I was worried for him because, you know, he's crawling back into the truck full of dead bodies that I gathered they were going to eat, because they reference food in the very beginning when they're shoveling a corpse over to Tom. And I was like, oh no, is Tom unknowingly going to get thrown into an incinerator or an oven and be made into like human food? Because that's what it looks like they're doing. They're eating people to survive in Vegas.
You think that's what they're doing? I didn't really get that. I didn't get that sentiment. I'm not sure where they're getting their meat from, but you might be right on that.
Maybe that was a joke that the guy who was shoveling, but like in the beginning when they have Mr. Moon in there, there's a guy he's working with right before Run, and he mentions food.
Yeah, so
maybe that guy's a cannibal.
Maybe. I also was wondering but then I figured I didn't know if Tom could drive. I also wondered if he was going to take the car keys and go once he realized, but that's what I was hoping he was going to, I was like, get in the car and go. But then I wasn't sure if he could, but he did drive. I think he drove to the place they gave him the car. So he's capable of driving. So I was like, he should drive, but then maybe he did something really smart, because he could have drove and that would have already, you know, had them watching him, and who knows what they would have done. So for him to crawl into the bodies instead of just driving the truck out and alerting them all, that was a very smart thing Tom did. And I love Tom. He's like my favorite character in this series so far, to be honest. I don't really have that. And Damon Robinson is asking, hi, did y'all talk about Trash Can? No, we haven't. We're still just talking about, at this moment, we're talking about Flagg and Bobby Terry and that awesome scene, and then Tom Cullen. So we're getting to Trash Can in just a second.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was interesting. And I do think, we're seeing that, Flagg is kind of in his room, kind of trying to figure things out. He's not really interacting with anyone. So he's not partaking. And the one time they see him is when he's ripped out some dude's heart. So you kind of have to wonder what's the end game with that. But then we also saw Trash Can. Yeah. We got to talk about Trash Can. Ezra Miller, aka the Flash in the DCU. He plays the Flash, or he's supposed to play Flash in his own movie whenever that comes out. And so he was Trash Can Man. We got introduced to Trash Can Man. And for those who are, watching the series straight off, then you don't know, but Trash Can Man is in the novel, and he's also in the 90s series. And he's a pretty central character to certain things that happen. We won't get into that necessarily, but I don't know. What did you think of his introduction? I've got thoughts and feelings about the way he was introduced, but what did you think of his introduction?
I think the thing he blew up the first time isn't his first rodeo. Like, he's definitely done this before. I'm curious to where all the bruises are coming from. And I liked how the explosion was in more close quarters in this one than the older one. And I think Ezra Miller is going to do this character justice. It's different than the original, but you could tell that Ezra's performance, you could tell by his performance that he was a fan of the original Trash Can.
Yeah, I had some feelings. I'm on the line. I guess I'll have to see how he plays it a little bit longer, because part of me was like, he was jerking off when the thing, and he's like jerking off. He pulled a Harold, because we all know in episode 1, Harold was jerking off to Franny's photo and stuff. Like, and so we got a lot of dudes jerking off to weird stuff, right? So he's jerking off to the fire. So and he's got burns and stuff. So like you said, we know this is not his first rodeo, right? And we got people in the chat who are saying they love the Trash Can Man. I did enjoy him, but I was a little bit online. I'm like, is Ezra kind of chewing the scenery here? Or is this good? Or am I just kind of starved for like another epic character in this series? Because everyone else, especially in Boulder, has been so downplayed that you get this really larger than life, crazy character that comes in that's very distinctive. And I think that's where I was mixed up at. I was like, okay, I get it. He's off his rocker. My Life for You, which is his thing towards Flagg, which is a very prominent thing also in the novel, and he's already very much devoted to Flagg in that regard. So I don't know. I like him. I like the extremeness of him. I also enjoyed the 90s guy. We'll talk about that a little bit. And I thought it was a different play. When he did come on, I was like, okay, we're getting somewhere now. Trash Can Man has entered the scene. And then his interaction with Lloyd was funny. Lloyd, who's not, everyone's not necessarily feeling. Those of you who are watching the live and those of you who are watching the replay, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe. But one of the things I'm noticing when y'all talk about Lloyd is y'all aren't really feeling him. Y'all are not feeling his portrayal. Y'all think there's too much of a kind of difference from maybe the 90s one and things like that. But it seems like that may be redeemed with Trash Can Man. People are liking the way he's being portrayed.
Yeah, and I like the way I think Trash Can is a good counterbalance to Lloyd, because Lloyd doesn't seem all whimsical and like, I'm in Vegas for the first time and everything's mine. But you have Trash Can, who is just chaos, and give it an opportunity, which was brought up by Harold in a later scene with Franny. So I think the theme of Trash Can coming into chaos being an opportunity, like this was the right character for his introduction.
I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Nick Paul, who's also joining us, and also Aya Shadow, thanks for joining us in the chat. And Nick Paul is joining us in the chat saying the series is going by the book. Many might not care for it, but it's modern day. And I do agree with that. And we'll talk a bit more about the comparison with the book, because they are sticking very close to it. Although I do think there's been some remixes for better or worse with some of the portrayals. And so Flagg basically wants Trashcan to go to the military base, and they have a little history lesson on the biggest fires ever. And so he wants them to go to the military base to pick up, I think, a warhead of some sort and bring it back. And Flagg says to Lloyd that the reason why he wants to do that is for those who are holding out, aka probably Boulder and any other place that doesn't want to join up with Flagg. So Flagg's got a bigger, he's thinking war right now.
Oh yeah.
When it comes to basically getting other people to bow down to him. So
he literally wants to take back America for himself.
Yeah, and maybe the world.
World too. Once he gets the flying capability.
Yeah. And Damon is saying in chat, yes, he's playing a true to the core pyromaniac. Some actually lust for fire. Yeah. And we're seeing that. And I appreciated that. And so we already know that Flagg is sending Trashcan Man on a mission. So we got him very briefly in Vegas, and then he's off to get the warhead. And it was a pretty powerful presentation of Trashcan. It was brief. I don't know how much more we're going to see him before the next time he might or may not come back with what Flagg sent him for. But now we know that Flagg is preparing to basically bomb all the other places. So that's pretty, there,
And that makes sense why Flagg's in America too, because like at the time this book was written, it was thought of, I don't know like if it changed, but like the US and Russia clearly had the most nuclear stockpile. And I think for the sake of this book and the American audience, Flagg picking America as the perfect place to gain all the firepower, all the artillery, all the warheads you want to nuke the world so many times over. I think Flagg showing up in America, especially in Vegas near like Nellis Air Force Base,
Sin City,
and Area 51, and also not that far away from like Nevada being nuclear testing sites. Like Nevada is the perfect ground zero for Flagg.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you, Poltergeist, in Ireland, watching us 1 a.m. Get some rest. Thanks so much for joining us here in the live, and all of you who are joining us in the live and the replay. Yeah, it's a lot to talk about when it comes to what Flagg is planning, and he's definitely going to war. Because I think you and I talked about this before, where I know Flagg doesn't like Mother Abagail, but I was like, okay, why can't they all, I'm not going to say kumbaya, why they can't all just coexist. But I was saying before that, we live in a world where people live in opposites. Yeah. So it's kind of like, why does Flagg feel like he needs to take out Mother Abagail necessarily? When are we going to get that kind of explanation for people who might not watch, know the novel and things? Like, why is he so determined to stomp out this other person if he thinks that he can really draw people to him? And so I think that talks about a little bit to what him and Mother Abagail face off with eventually when it comes to,
Also, horror is the best horror, like Stephen King, the novelist, and The Stand. I don't know why I call him a novelist. We all know who Stephen King is, right? But he's like an American literary god. And I think horror comes from reality, and there is like a lot of horror in truth. And like we currently live in a world, thankfully not to this scale, where there are groups of people who clearly don't believe that other people who they've never met before have any right to exist.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of that reflection. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of what brings this whole thing home.
And I think that makes sense.
Sorry to bring it down. Sorry.
No, it doesn't bring it down. I think because that's one of the reasons why I love horror so much, because it is a warped and sometimes not so warped reflection of, various aspects of our society. Like Nick Paul is saying in the chat, Flagg wants to be number one. And I think that plays to his personality, the egomaniac. He can't allow other people to exist in the same world that he's building, even if for the most part he has the most tech, the most manpower, the most lustrous type appeal to people who just want to live and let live and whatnot. So,
sorry, I love this. I'm so engaged in this shit. But it's also, I had this thought, Flagg is, like the American flag and other countries that they have their flag. A lot of them back in the day, before we entered this modern world, they claim stake as their own using a flag. And
Yeah.
maybe that's a little bit too much on the nose symbolism for a villain of this character. But people back in the day, all the way up to the moon landing, laid claim of their land with the use of a flag, more often for evil than for good.
Okay.
So dominance.
A little history there. Yeah. And, you know, we're talking about Flagg. So I feel like we need to go to the part where we have the face off with Flagg and Mother Abagail, which was another favorite scene of mine. I had a few favorite scenes in this episode, and the Flagg tearing apart Bobby Terry was one of them. And this face off with Mother Abagail and Flagg, I thought was epic. I mean, it was subtle, but it was epic. I think it revealed character flaws, and not in like, oh, this is a bad thing about the character, but like who they are. It revealed another layer to both sides, not just one, because we talked about this situation with Mother Abagail, right? Where we were talking about how some people were feeling like this Mother Abagail, Whoopi Goldberg's portrayal of her was a little more grumpy than we had got from Ruby Dee, who was in the 90s series. And people weren't kind of expecting that. And we had talked about how in the novel, she's closer to Whoopi Goldberg. She's closer to what Whoopi Goldberg is portraying her as, which is not necessarily love and light all the time, a little bit grumpy. I mean, she's over 100 years old and she's kind of tired and she wants to, you know, join her family on the other side. She can't necessarily. She's wondering why God is keeping her alive. And we saw that. Flagg pointed that out. And it was, I love that they touched on it, because of course, those who like maybe know the novel could like see that this was, but it was nice that they revealed that within this interpretation.
And it was great. It was very true to the book. It was very biblical as well. Like you see Whoopi, Mother Abagail, as the Jesus figure who, despite being tormented by Randall Flagg, who's clearly Satan, who doesn't go by that name anymore, but
is he Satan? That's the question. You know, is he really Satan?
But Mother Abagail is doing a great job as God and Jesus by turning the other cheek, no matter what else is happening. Because Mother Abagail wants to open up a can of whoop ass, but she wants to she's turning the other cheek.
That too. I think she also sees, as she pointed out, because what Flagg pointed out to her was, you want to die. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do this. Let me take you somewhere. He's trying to, get her to kind of come with him, not with him, but basically let me kill you. So basically you don't have to deal with this. And so, and Mother Abagail, I think this is a part, Josh Watson in the chat is saying he's definitely saying, I think so, but I don't think so. I don't think he's saying, I don't think he's exactly saying. And maybe I think that because of what I've read in terms of what Stephen King has written him as, but I think he has elements of it. Yeah. But in this particular case, it was interesting that he pointed that out. And Mother Abagail probably knows it's true that she wants to die. She's tired. She's tired. And and he knows too, Flagg knows too, that she hasn't been able to hear God for some time. And she doesn't know why. And so he knows this. But then Abagail points out to Flagg the idea of maybe what we'll see more in the series, which is he's not as strong as he pretends to be. He's not as bigger than life, and that he is something of a magician, and that people will eventually see through that. And I think that touched Flagg as well, because I think there is, a moment of that where we see that he has some issues, like he can't figure out who Tom Cullen is, and it's pissing him off. Like, it's such a big deal to him that he doesn't know who the third spy is. And you kind of wonder, well, what are you so afraid of the third spy? But I think it's the principle of the matter that he can't figure it out. And it touches on, as Mother Abagail touches on, his insecurities.
Yeah, it's the folly of evil, which I think insecurities really are. Because, the writers, didn't somebody attached to this project say that Flagg was sexy Donald Trump?
Yes. Or that's what people are saying when they first reviewed the series.
Yeah, and he was, he's to some a sharp-dressed man, a good-looking man in their eyes, and who's so paranoid about spies, and he can't figure out anything. He's always looking for the whistleblower. He's always looking for this, that, and the other, and that's what it reminded me of. Like, this guy, he thinks in his mind he's so into his own world, like he has everything nailed down when he clearly doesn't. And I love seeing that his little world is starting to crack and crumble. And one thing I thought about, I watched this episode twice now. It's funny how these guys are just hanging out in the Inferno. Like, they're not going to other casinos. It's like,
that's probably a budget thing. I don't know.
Bobby, you got Caesars, you got like all kinds
of
Flamingo, you got putt golf courses, you got go-karts, you have the Taco Bell Cantina. Like, if I was Randall Flagg, I'd be living there. But yeah, it's funny watching this for a second time with a different perspective on the character. Like, yeah, so he's more flashy than has his shit together.
Yeah, like he busts the door open, which was a cool display of power, and he kills this guy, but then he can't figure out who Tom Cullen is. And Blue Wolf Phoenix in the chat is saying he represents the embodiment of Satan. That's, that's a thought for sure. Nick Paul is saying Tom Cullen outsmarted him. And I think that's what gets to him. He does not like being outsmarted. Like, it's kind of like, what could this third spy do to him, right? It's clear he can't really do anything, but it's very also clear that it really irks him that someone is able to get beyond him, which is also why he wants to snuff out Mother Abagail, because she is a competition to him. So I love this face-off with them, because we didn't get that in the 90s, when we didn't get a face-off between them in that regard, except like one time, like in the cornfield, very briefly. But this was all out on her journey, which, segueing into Mother Abagail, we got to see her journey. We got to see her in the woods trying to figure out what to do. She went in the woods looking for God.
Yeah.
And I think, that segues into what was going on in Boulder, because people were distraught. They were like, oh my gosh, where is Mother A? Where is our savior? That was a big thing. And Damon is saying in the chat, he's not the devil, he is a demon, or demons, as he's quoted, we are legion. Yeah, I lean more towards that he has demon-like qualities. I feel like if he was Satan, I think it'd be a lot more epic than he's doing right now.
He would clean the elevator. Like, that's how you knew he was unhinged. He was like, oh my God, I just ripped a dude's heart out. To just, it's clean.
Yeah, like he could have snapped his fingers. Why didn't he snap his fingers? There was a lot of stuff he wasn't doing. Vera is saying in the chat, Flagg seems to be more of a parlor trick magician. And I think that's what we're touching on, right? Like, I agree with Vera on that. I think there's limits to his power, and I think that messes with his ego, and he can't deal with that, which is why Tom Cullen has really done something when it comes to outsmarting him. Tom Cullen of all people, which is awesome, so I appreciated that.
And so I find that there was almost like a hidden underlining theme in this episode, with the exception of like Tom, but it was like male fragility.
Yeah, this idea of these big grandioso displays, but then also not being able to really follow through, and that really hurting them, because you have this thing with Mother Abagail going off on her own. And then to get into what's going on in Boulder, you have this situation where they are in disarray. And speaking of disarray, I love Ray cussing out the rest of the committee. I don't know who else loved that in the chat and the replay, because I think we talked about this a few episodes ago. It did not sit right with me that the council of Stu and them, although minus Stu, because Stu was a good one, but the rest of them were kind of just deciding everyone's fate. Like, it was okay sending these spies out to danger, 2 who have died now, and being okay with deciding other people's fate. Oh, we're going to do this. We're looking for Mother Abagail. But Ray is like, y'all aren't really looking for her. I'm really looking for her. And I really appreciated that they pointed that out, that Ray was pissed, because I don't know if it was Damon in the chat who said it, like, someone needs to check in with Ray, because she's the one who seems to be doing most of the work when it comes to Mother Abagail and Boulder while the rest of them kind of sit around and make decisions. So I love the fact that she cussed them out.
Oh, it was well deserved. It was almost like how activists are like, yo, how come you and government aren't doing anything? Like, that's what it seemed like.
Moments like that. And I appreciated that, because I was like, yeah, they need to point that out, because it is kind of like, well, what are you guys doing about the fact that Mother Abagail, why? And then, Stu's saying, well, Mother Abagail doesn't want us looking for her. And then Ray's like, okay, but so what,
Yeah, and I would argue that there were the two other people on the council were actually doing work. Believe, what was the guy, the professor?
Mm-hmm.
He was writing the speech for Stu. Yeah. And Nick, I guess, was just waiting around to be the voice of God.
They were politicking, I guess, in a way. Victoria Swift is saying in the chat, I wanted Tom to see Dana's body and this be the reason he has a sense of urgency to leave. Seems like they are just trying to find reason to show Rat Woman, right? Yeah, that was Rat Woman again, when she just didn't have her peacock thing, right? The one with that was, like I said, I couldn't, I feel like it's such a waste of a character, Rat Woman, in a way. Yeah, it's definitely not as prominent. We'll talk about that in the differences. But yeah, so we see in Boulder that Mother A is missing. Ray is actually Ray's the real leader here, if you ask me, of this situation. But we have the thing with the committee, and basically this gets us into Nadine and Harold's situation, which I'll admit it was epic. I thought that whole situation was pretty epic. What did you think about it?
Oh, between Nadine and Harold?
Yeah. Like the whole, overall, we'll get into the details of it, but what did you think the way it was carried out, the way that this epic, it was all happened in a day too. What did you think about that?
What an intense day in Boulder. Oh man. What I love about Harold is he's on the edge of being redeemable, despite all the horrible things he did. But then he just lets the worst part of being a man overtake him, and then he goes down that road. And he has logical questions in the beginning, like, what is Flagg telling that he's not telling me? But I'm like, okay, I get that. But then flip it over, oh, he's an incel terrorist. Okay. You get what I mean?
Yeah, and so he had the manifesto, all of that. Yeah,
Harold had the manifesto, and it's wild. Also, I don't know if this was a tidbit or anything, but the date was oddly specific on there. It was like, I went back and I reread it, and it was September 11th. Now, I know that was different in Stephen King's world, but the date goes 9/11 to November 11th. Which are really oddly specific dates for the U.S. military, even though I know that he was chronologically, writing about being the hero in his own story.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm looking way too much into the manifesto ordeal, because manifestos have been in the news more often than not as of late. But I thought that was a very odd detail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think they're like Nick was saying in the chat, they're bringing in some modern play to it to relate it to our world, to our society right now, which makes sense. And Vera's saying in chat, the character development is really weak and too much exposition. The whole judge thing wasn't played out. And we actually were talking about that, how I felt that it was kind of anticlimactic that Judge Ferris died off screen. I was like, we saw her getting a gun and everything. And next time we see her, she's in a body bag. And I'll also say this to the Nadine and Harold situation. And I think this actually shows, one, as the creators of the series let us already know, that they really love the Harold character. And that shows. It shows because he has gotten so many chances. I mean, I think if you counted this, Harold, the Harold character is probably the one who has talked the most in the whole show. We got so much inner situation with Harold, so much outer, so many times of him talking about how he just feels this way or that. And it was just such a focus on the incel character that there was, I feel, a lack of balance with caring about the other characters, like Nick, for example. You know, out of the Harold and Nadine situation, we get what seemingly is the death of Nick. Nick, who for I think what's supposed to be kind of one of the hearts of the series. We saw that with him and Tom, and that was such a great moment in episode 3, and then he dies. And I have to admit, I didn't feel as affected as I had in the 90s series when the same situation happened to Nick. And I think it was because I didn't get to spend as much time with him this time around. And I've spent so much time with Harold watching his, his progression, and but it's like he's always, it was a good arc. Don't get me wrong, I appreciated the way they dove into Harold things, but it's like this is kind of lopsided because it's made it so we don't care as much for the other characters, like the other situation with Franny, the whole thing with him, with Harold and Franny. And that was a poignant scene. I felt it, but I was like, this is the one time I actually really care about what Franny is saying. That's right. What I thought when I was like, okay, this is acting. This is a moment. She's showing some conviction. She's showing some, you're the only person who is with me from the other world before all of this. And I was like, wow. And I was like, where was this before this episode? You know what I mean? I was like, where was all of this?
Like, how long did it take those suicide pills to wear off? Like, she finally got her humanity back.
Yeah, it wasn't even humanity. It was like up to this point, she was there to kind of kiss Stu a lot, kind of side-eye Harold. And then this episode, she played more of a less annoying part than, because I know in the last episode, I think a lot of us weren't feeling her and the way she went about that whole situation with putting Larry in in Harold's house. And so in this episode, I felt more for her. And so, I don't know. I think it was weird. I felt, and even with Nadine's situation, I started to feel a little bit more for Nadine, I think starting episode 4, and episode 5. And this episode, I think it was good too, because, she wanted to save the children. She cared about the children because she did used to be a teacher at one time. Yeah. And funny enough, she looked to save Larry.
Yeah. Like, I think she was in a rock and a hard place. She realizes what her prophecy is and that she has to, fulfill it. Now that that one time she tried to go over to Larry's house, she got rejected. I felt for her. Like, I didn't think that I would actually fall for Nadine and, just not fall, in love or anything. No, not at all. But, just be like, oh, huh. Wow.
I cared for her a bit more.
Conflicted. That's what I meant. Very, very conflicted. And going back to what you're talking about, Harold being an incel character, and also Harold is a writer. And I think you could tell that, most of the people who write, well, it's a given. Anybody who writes a story for TV is a writer. And the writers are the backbones for the series. And I think when you have something as amazing as The Stand, when you have a writer's perspective, in their mind, the writers are always the coolest characters.
Yeah,
and
or the most interesting to explore, yeah.
Yeah, you could, I bet a writer was like, what is the worst person I could potentially be? And that's how you get Harold, because Harold brings up what he was rejected, I think 86 rejection letters.
Yeah.
And his character in the beginning is bookend up until the point by rejection, whether it comes out of his mouth or he puts the papers on a nail in the wall that Franny helped put up.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And I definitely think you could see how interested they were with Harold, to the point where maybe they forgot this was an ensemble piece, because I feel like they really center here, to the point where we're just now getting a lot more Flagg. And I think that's a shame, because I feel like we should have got a lot more Flagg from episode 2, to be honest. And H. Hauserman in the chat is saying, I was surprised by the character take on the Trashcan Man. And I also did not expect him to just show up on the fly. I expected him to get his own episode like other characters got in the series. I can see that. I think this goes to what we're talking about the lopsidedness, how certain characters got a lot more focus than others, even though they're just as pivotal when it comes to it. And I have to definitely agree with Victoria in the chat, where she's saying even Nick's death didn't make sense in the show. I didn't get the piano symbolism. And side note, how the bomb get in the piano? I was confused on that too, because I thought I thought Nadine brought the bomb in and put it there on the side of the piano. And then Nick opens the piano and there's another bomb. And I'm like, who did that? And when did they get the bomb in the piano?
Did somebody else break into their house while they were breaking into Harold's? That
I didn't understand how the bomb got there. Maybe I missed something. It's the same thing like people were talking about Harold's cameras. You know, it was a nice poignant scene for Franny to see that he had been filming her bedroom for some time, but it also made no sense.
It's a refrigerator question because it's kind of like, how did Indiana Jones get aboard the sub in Raiders of the Lost Ark? Like, it's really, yeah, that's a very good point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did Bomb get a piano?
Exactly. And Halterman is actually leaning on something from the novel when he says that Franny seemed to have intuition. And I can see that. I can see, you know, maybe in the supernatural sense that some of them just sense things. But I honestly, I don't think they conveyed that as much with Franny as they could have, you know, to the point where it just seemed like, I mean, yeah, she ended up breaking into Harold's place, which was great because she needed to do that. But at the same time, it was like, where is this coming from? We haven't seen them interact in a minute, you know? So I think it didn't land as much. Although, like I said, the Harold and Franny scene was powerful. There was a lot of powerful scenes in this episode. I just kind of wish that there was more of a buildup to these scenes in a way. Because I was like, man, everything's like popping off this episode. If only there was more of a buildup so it could resonate with me more, you know? And I don't feel like it resonated with me as much as had they built up certain moments. And I guess I kind of felt something when Nadine saved Larry. I thought that, like you said, It showed the moment with the two of them and how she did care for him. And Joe spoke twice this episode. Joe, the mute who hadn't been speaking, spoke twice. He spoke to Larry, hinting at Nadine. Mama Nadine is not the same as regular Nadine. And I think he also heard Mama Abagail's voice and was able to find her. Yeah. Which I think speaks to what Hauserman was saying, which is the intuition of certain characters having otherworldly kind of psychic abilities that isn't really outwardly said. Yeah. And so we saw that a little bit.
And that's what I meant by like Nadine, like I felt redemption for her because she knew what she had to do, but she wasn't full-blown evil. Like there's kind of like a goodness in her character still. But she's going to let the goodness take a full back seat.
Yeah, exactly. Or she's going to make amends. It's like, okay, you want me to kill these people, but I'm not going to kill the kids. And I don't want to kill the guy I kind of like, Larry. And I want him to be able to be saved. So, you know, that worked out. And then what was the other thing? So we have that. Mother Abagail is found. And basically Harold and Nadine both pressed the button to blow up the Vigil area. Stu seems to be saved. Franny is saved. Nick is now dead. And Nick also, I guess, drew a picture for Mother Abagail that said silencio, which is silence in Spanish. I didn't understand. Did you get that reference? Like what that was about? I
was trying to figure that one out. Silencio. And he was on a boat or like, it looked like a rowboat in a lake with like the sun coming out. And that it almost looked like peace and quiet. Like he knew everything was going to be okay, or it was about he couldn't hear. But it almost looked like he can't hear anything anymore but peace. And maybe that's what I got. Like it was almost a precursor. Like maybe Nick knew he was going to die.
That's what I'm wondering. Do you think he had like intuition? Like maybe he sensed that this was it, that he wasn't gonna make it, because he didn't seem to run out. I don't know if I open the thing and I see him, I'm about to jet.
It happened in the original.
Well, we'll talk about that. And you're right. In the original, Nick grabbed it and tried to run away, so then it hurt everybody. And this one, because it was in the piano randomly, he couldn't do that, and so he dies. He died either way, but it was kind of weird the way they had that play out, I think. I don't know. There was just, you know.
Like, how did it get there? Because I thought it was a pipe bomb. Like, oh, that's clearly a pipe bomb disguised as a poster.
Yeah.
Or blueprints.
But how and why? And when did Harold get in there to change the thing if everyone had been going in and out all day?
Yeah, because it almost seemed like the pipe was too small to fit that explosive in there.
Yeah, it was a little weird. Yeah. Didn't land as well. So, I mean, it was an epic. This is the thing. It was an epic episode, but certain things were like, in retrospect, you're like, you could have done that a little bit better. Could have followed through a little bit more.
You almost have to suspend disbelief.
Yes.
A lot in this episode to make it really good.
Suspend disbelief and also kind of forget that they didn't build up certain things. Mm-hmm. that kind of both.
You know what I thought was an odd choice, and I watched it again. It's something you won't get on the first look, but when the bomb went off and Franny and Stu were holding on to each other, it looked like, for whatever reason, maybe this is comic relief, but they kind of slow-moed and zoomed in on James Marsden's ass a little bit when the whole thing was blowing up, and I was like, I get it, CBS. I get it.
It's James Marsden. What can you do? I mean, you gotta give people something. He is Stu. Like one of the co-teachers said to Nadine, I just want to see that Stu. So they knew what was up. Stu's
and they saw that Stu and those jeans just like
yes, exactly. Hauserman is saying, I really see your points. They have really revolved this whole series around Harold, who is a great character, but there are so many more who deserve the spotlight. Nick's intuition was in the book. Exactly. And I think it also showed a bit more in the 90s one. And I didn't see it as much. He didn't get as much play as I think Nick should have. I think Nick should have been a bit more central to this. Although, like others are saying, Brent Showers, thanks for joining us in the chat. The guy who's playing Harold has some serious acting shots. And he does. He, for one thing, I will say, if you're going to have a character that has a century, you better get an actor who can carry that. And he definitely has carried that. I just think that Harold's not the most deserving character to get that much play. And I think that's my issue. Nothing against the actor, more so why the writers really put the focus on Harold and what he represents. And I kind of got his conversation with Franny, the whole, the world has rejected me, but Franny kind of put reality to him. She's like, the world didn't reject you. That's not what's happened here. So I think that was also kind of like, you're not as rejected as you like to believe. You want to play victim here so you can feel a certain way because the girl rejected you. But these are your own choices. So I did like that. I really enjoyed the conversation with them.
Oh, that was really good. And I love the fact that it revealed more and more that Harold is the artist who's afraid to fail. Mm-hmm. And maybe his world was the 86 rejection letters. Yeah. And also 86 meaning, So it was really good symbolism.
Yeah, really good symbolism. And so we get to the part where we have to talk about, and we've been hinting at it, kind of the differences between the 90s, the book, and this series. And I think a lot of us are in agreement that this one very much is a little bit closer to the details of the book. I will argue that I don't think in certain respects they're getting the themes of it as well as they could have. As others have said, Nick was the heart and soul of the book, of the story, and yet the heart and soul just died in a bomb, and I didn't feel as much as I wanted to, and I think they're doing well with Tom. I think Tom Cullen is doing well enough. I really like his interpretation. Harold's getting a lot of play, more than he did in the 90s series.
Yeah, ever did.
And I'd argue that Fran and Stu are getting a little bit of short. Stu definitely, I feel like, is getting the short end of the stick when it comes to, he's just kind of around a little bit, which is weird to me.
Oddly enough, that he was in X-Men back in the day, because he's less of Cyclops and more of a Professor X in this one, rather than he's just making sure everything is, he basically, Boulder is his mutant academy. And if you don't know what any of these terms are, he's more of the leader or the president of Boulder, more than a leader. Everything's happening, he's trying to get everything under control, but he's not the leading man in this show anymore.
Yeah, and I agree with that, which is, it's kind of weird. It's a little bit of a waste of James Marsden in a way. Brent is saying it's now apparent Mother Abagail knows the Dark Man isn't like Satan, but that she knows where he's from, which makes me realize she understands the Dark Tower, possibly. Dark Tower being another series by Stephen King, another book series, and that ill-fated movie with my man Idris Elba that was doomed from the start with the way they were going about it. But yeah, that's a bigger thing up to who Flagg is and what he could be. And I definitely agree with Victoria. That's another point where in this one, they made a big deal that Julie knew who Tom was, and then they never followed up. She never followed up. Hearing Flagg talk about there's a spy, and she never mentions this guy I know who totally was with this other dude who left to go somewhere else. Maybe it's him. She never brings it up. And that's a difference with the 90s series, because I think in the 90s series, Julie did mention him to Flagg. Yeah. Or in the room, she brought it up. Like, that's that guy. And then by then Tom was gone too. But they never mention again Julie bringing it up.
Yeah,
which was like, okay.
It's odd that for a series where everybody dies, it seems like not everybody dies, but Captain Trips wipes out 99% of the population. And I just find that wild that for a show that is so heavy-handed on death, the show doesn't know what characters to kill out of the script to make a better story. And that's the irony of The Stand 2021.
Yeah. No, and to make it and to play on what would really affect the audience. I feel like I'm watching the incel in the post-apocalypse, and that's the main thing that we're getting with this back thing of good versus evil with Mother Abagail and Flagg. I feel like that's what we've been watching, and I feel like they've been drawing out how long Harold's supposed to stay around for, because we know in the novel, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but yeah. And so it's like, have they been drawing this out so that this character is central as long as he can be? And then Nick gets killed in the episode 6, and it's like, I hardly got to see Nick. Like, what? Like, okay. Like, that was weird. And then there's a little bit of a difference with how they portrayed Trashcan Man and from the novel versus this series. And so in the 90s series, it was kind of similar. We didn't see him much. He was already kind of out of his mind. In the novel, Trashcan Man, and maybe they might expand on this a little bit more if we ever see Ezra again. It seems a little bit of a waste to have Ezra Miller and just have him show up then and then later. But he does have a backstory in the novel. He, his father went crazy. It was a whole thing. And there's a question of whether or not Trashcan Man, Dwight, was, not Dwight, Donald Merwin Albert is Trashcan Man's real name in the novel. And so there's a question of whether or not he inherited his father's craziness and this whole situation with that. And so he grows up and he has an affinity towards starting fires and things. And so he goes back and forth between being, sort of trying to be normal, but then getting truly rejected by society. If anyone's really a person that's been rejected by society, it's probably Trashcan Man, as displayed in the novel. And so you have this situation where he's getting rejected. He goes back and forth between institutions. He tries to go back to school when his mom takes him out of the institution, but he can't adapt. And so he eventually comes to, Flagg reaches out to him. And so he goes to Las Vegas, but it was kind of different the way they did this one, because in the novel, he actually goes to Vegas and he's able to be there for a while. Like, he works, he feels accepted. He likes being accepted for who he is, but he still has, of course, his affinity towards fire. And so he starts on fire, and they do this whole thing where they're teasing him, and this reminds him of stuff. So he starts blowing up planes and stuff. And this actually happened in the 90s series where he blew up a plane, and he also, in the novel, he blew up some planes, and he also killed the pilots. And that was a big setback for Flagg. And that's what sent him off into the desert to look for this military missile. And what they did differently in this one is that they have Flagg ask him directly for the missile, for the fire thing, which wasn't what happened in the novel at all.
Yeah.
So they kind of switched it around where Flagg wanted it immediately, while in the novel, it was kind of Trashcan Man's idea to go get it because he felt like he had done something bad and blowing up the planes and stuff for for that Flagg wanted, which probably were the planes that were going to attack Boulder originally or something like that. So they switched up. They kind of remixed it. They didn't give him much of a backstory. You just know he likes fire. We get a little bit with the dream that maybe he was ridiculed and now he gets to set everything on fire, and he's really good with fire. And that was another thing in the novel. In the novel, they made it a little bit more supernatural, that he had an intuition, like others have been talking about intuition that's played big in the novel, that he had an intuition towards how to work with fire, how to sense where fire was and things. And so Flagg reaches out to him because he's Are we in?
M-O-O-N, I'm back.
Okay, I'm gonna let you in. Sorry about that, guys.
Sorry, guys. M-O-O-N. That spells.
That spells our internet started wonking up. That was Flagg.
That was Flagg.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, Harold's outside. He works for Spectrum now.
I guess.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, y'all.
But yeah, Trashcan cut out there in the best convo with the best characters.
Right?
Yeah. Where did you leave off?
I was talking about the difference with Trashcan and the novel. And how it's explained of how he goes to go out in the desert. Hauserman is actually saying Trash does go in the desert in the novel, amazes Flagg's team because he knows about the military weapons. I hope that they go how he gets that nuclear missile in the desert. Yeah, that's something that they.
Because like I have enough faith in our military to know that if everything went under, nuclear missiles would be under strict lock and key to the last person breathing. So it would probably be insanely difficult to get a hold of a nuclear warhead. Like you have to know through like intuition to probably get your hands on nuclear material. Because, the president has to go through several people to be able to hold the nuclear football.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be very interesting to see how in the world this Trashcan gets his hand on a warhead.
Exactly. And there's a whole way that happens. And then you have it where, Brent is actually saying, Hauserman, he was talking to Hauserman, that's the one thing I never understood much from the series. What made Trashcan Man qualified to handle nuclear weapons? I think that actually talks a little bit to what the novel was saying, that there's some type of power he has when it comes to fire itself.
Yeah.
So
that makes way more sense. Because why would Flagg seek him out like, I want you? And
exactly.
I loved when the Dark Man actually was the Dark Man, and he's like this Grim Reaper of death, who's just really a magic trick done by Flagg in the Inferno Casino. Like that was awesome.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So that was a little bit of the difference. And then I guess I feel like I don't think the face off with Franny and Harold happened originally.
No, it didn't. It didn't happen like that because I think when the bomb went off and like prior to that, Harold was like really kind of standoffish kind of with Nadine. And yeah, even when the bomb went off, I think it was in like a gift wrapped shoebox in the closet.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nick ran out and he's like, trying to warn everybody, but he can't.
Which one did you like better? The way they played this one out or the way the 90s series played this one? Now, let us know in the chat for those of you who watched the 90s series. Which one did you like better the way it played out? I'm kind of with Victoria when she said that it didn't make sense to her how that bond. I just felt like it was.
Yeah.
I mean, things happened and it was cool, but it was also kind of like, well, how did this happen? I felt like the thing with the shoebox in the closet was more believable.
Yeah, it was. And I thought it was very odd how it was oddly timed, how the party happened outside on that tiny porch. It was like a cul-de-sac block party in this one and not like inside the house the way Harold wanted. Mm-hmm. So I wonder how going into the show now, how Harold would react to find out that he didn't kill everybody in the council. And I'm wondering if Harold is just going to book it. Like,
well, they have to. Franny found out.
Go back up. Yeah, so I wonder, like, going into this, like, how much is going to be looking for Harold and Nadine.
Yeah, and
like, are they going to jump into it?
Yeah, and it definitely seems like people in the chat, and also let us know on the replay if you're watching this, are liking the 90s one better. I just thought that landed more. This whole vigil that I don't know, was there a vigil in the novel? Can someone let me know, for those of you in the replay and in the chat, was there how was the actual play out of the series of the bomb in the novel? Was it different in that, because I want to know. And
to answer your question, before the bomb blew up, in the house, I love the 90s version better.
Yeah, I liked it too. I felt like I cared for Nick more. We got that little thing with Nick, and they kind of did it with this in a way, but like I said, I wasn't feeling the thing with Nick because I hadn't had a chance to get to know him as well.
Yeah, I feel like overall was rushed, and this show should have been 5 seasons.
I feel like the first season should have been everyone trying to get to Boulder. Because if you did that, you would have 9 hours worth of all the characters they need to deal with. I mean, just look at what we were talking about with Trashcan Man. His backstory. There's so much to dive into his backstory. Same thing with Tom Cullen. There's a lot with his backstory that they didn't get into. There were so many different things of people's lives before the plague. And guess who the only person we got to see before the plague was Harold and Franny. More so Harold. That's who we got to see before the plague went down for the most part. Everyone else, we kind of met them after the plague, yet they have these cool backstories that we didn't get to go into. And yes, Brent is also saying, he said earlier in the chat, can we talk about how Flagg ate a man? And so, yes, Flagg ate a man in this episode. Like, does he do that in the book? Let us know in the chat. I'm not exactly sure. Another thing that Damon Robinson had actually said that I think is very interesting with the difference with the 90s version is that they're not showing, because in the 90s version, what I also appreciated was that Flagg kept changing back and forth between his demon self and the human self. We aren't getting that at all. The most we got was the dead lights of the eyes, dead lights like Pennywise in the last episode. We haven't gotten any kind of change.
No, and even I thought Trashcan, the one thing I love Trashcan for. Now, I love both versions. I think they're played respectfully, but I just miss the... you can tell Trashcan blew himself up a minute ago because he had a lot more burn scars on his face. And Trashcan in the 90s one was actively doing it, and you could tell that he was actually being weathered away because you get what I mean? Like he had like scarring on his face, but 90s Trash had like a glazed donut look of his skin was crispy. Like he almost had like this weird like fried chicken donut glaze on him. Like he was golden. And this one, it looks like everything's being done in the past.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a few remixes there that it's kind of interesting. And I like I said, I feel like whether or not the Franny and Harold thing happened in the book or not, it was a nice touch. It kind of gave that send off, because for Harold to do all of this for Franny and then to kind of, like in the 90s version, he blew it up and then he bounced. And so there was never really any kind of confrontation. They all just kind of assumed, I think it was like a throwaway line, like, well, we found it in Harold's thing, all this stuff down in the basement. So to make it so Franny is the one that goes after Harold, I think that gave her more purpose. And Hauserman is saying, what about Kojak? Yeah, I don't know where Kojak went. We saw him like twice.
Yeah.
I hope he's fine. I feel like, I think we'll probably see him later on because he's important for reasons. Don't want to get into for people who don't know, but like hopefully we see him a bit much later on. But yeah, I don't know. What are you thinking of this series so far? Let us know in the chat and the replay. Are y'all? I feel like this has been a mixed bag so far, and we're going. There's 9 episodes, right, total. So we got like 3 episodes left, and I just feel like this should have been like episode 4 or something.
Yeah, it feels weird the way they're building it. Like if they were building it the way they were, I feel like Harold, just as a bad guy watching any other hour drama, that Harold is the heavy at the end of season 1 that you have to kill to get out of the way in order to progress into season 2 for a bigger, badder villain. And why isn't this happening? That is my confusion on this, because like, okay, 9 in a season, cool. Harold is going to die at the end of the episode 9, and then we're going to go to Vegas in season 2, even if they wanted to speed it up like that. It just does. It's weird. And I'm kind of going along for the ride, but I'm not 100% on board with it.
Yeah, it's a little different. And I'm still not feeling how they did some of the characters. And I do think that we could have I think this could have been like a 2-season event. And those are possible. Everyone's doing different stuff with streaming. They could have made this a 2-season event. They could have, if they really wanted to, if they were all hard up for Harold, they could have really focused on his character like they've done for most of this season with everything going, and then like let the explosion maybe be the season finale of season 1. And then we go into season 2 of what happens next. Now, it would suck to have to wait a whole year and some change to get that, but I think it would have played out better.
Yeah, because if
give us more episodes. It's not unheard of to have 22 episodes, but you should do that with network TV. So it doesn't have to be 9 episodes. They could have done this in maybe 15 episodes or something.
Yeah, because right when you get rid of Harold and you get rid of Nadine, your problems in Boulder are technically over for a while. Give or take like a couple of Marauders. That I don't think hit Boulder yet, because I think it's all about Flagg versus Abagail. I could be dead wrong, but I do know that Flagg in the 90s one sets up people to guard the road to Vegas, because he knows that they're coming. And which it's a
tighter ship. He runs a tighter ship in Vegas. And I think someone pointed it out last time. Actually, I wanted to give them a shout out, because they actually, for those of you who watched the replay, I totally read the replay comments, and I appreciate y'all for, going in there and watching afterwards, and all of you in the live as well. But in the replay, someone actually did explain that in Vegas, in the novel, there was a whole thing about no drugs or alcohol or anything like that. No one was supposed to be doing those sort of things. So he ran it as a way tighter ship than he does now. They switched that for some reason.
Yeah, now it's all about like, what is your vice, your biggest excess, and just everything imaginable. Just to keep all these people in one casino in Vegas is what I'm basically going after. Yeah.
Eggland, thank you. In the replay, you watched the last episode. You were the one giving you a shout out right now for explaining what went on in Vegas for the 70s version. And I think people in the chat are kind of saying the same thing when it comes to some of the differences. I think people are split. Some people, like David Robinson in the chat, really love Trashcan Man. Other people are not feeling Trashcan Man as much. Let us know in the replay, what do you feel about Ezra Miller when it comes to playing trash? I'm on the borderline with him, because part of me feels like he's chewing the scenery and it's a bit over the top and out of nowhere. And the other part is like, we need a character like this, because if not, it downplays way too much. So
yeah, without Flagg, it kind of turns into a soap.
Yeah, I mean,
This
it's the Incel Diaries. That's what we've been watching
pretty much
with Harold and Boulder because it's so centered on him.
Yeah, it's like I know you're gonna absolutely hate me for this, but like,
are you about to bring up Cobra Kai?
I might, but
No,
I'm
we're
just
not.
saying,
No.
as far as like a resurgence of a series, like if you want to study how it should be done, that's how you do it. That's all I was gonna say on bringing back a classic franchise and giving it a modernized update. But yeah, Victoria Swift. Yeah, New Vegas is boring to me. People having sex on the road and killing each other is not amusing to me. Yeah, you can find, like, we went to Vegas and you can find stripper baseball cards in the street.
Yeah.
And
it's not that much different, but like others were saying, in the 70s, this was a thing. But also in the 70s, in the novel, they weren't allowed to do drugs. So
yeah,
what was that about? You know what I mean? So
exactly.
it'd be interesting to know why the writers chose that route for this one.
It just seems really safe now. I mean, we've been through alone, like in this world, we've seen horrible things happen in the past, and it's like it kind of makes sex and drugs kind of what? Like,
yeah,
I mean, also,
yeah.
Oh, sorry to cut you off. Basically, like, you know, there are governments who are claiming that like drugs, like more often than not, marijuana is essential so to like get through a pandemic, you know, and it's like, oh, you can't smoke, and Cobra fucking Kai, yeah, exactly. An origin, a continuation of a saga done well. Yeah, and that's all I was going to say. But yeah, not enough.
Matt C is actually bringing up what we've been talking about, and we got to talk about not enough. Baby, can you dig your man? Can we talk about that for just 1 second? Larry was also supposed to sing at the Vigil tonight. How is it every time he's supposed to do something, something else happens? I'm starting to think, Michael has said it before, I'm starting to think they cast an actor who can't sing. Maybe that's why. But you can lip sync. Why have we not really heard Baby Can You Dig Your Man? Flagg's not singing it. Nothing is happening with that. That's so weird to me.
You mean you can't go back to the 90s version, take that sound bite and give it an auto tune and like update it? Because even though Larry in the 90s was right, or he was white, he also did, like, he appropriated African American
music. But either way, it's like we did not hear Baby Can You Dig Your Man enough.
I
just don't understand why we haven't heard that a lot in this series, which is so weird to me.
Yeah, you can take that song from back then, give it an auto tune, and it would sound like it is today. Yeah. You know, or you could even make Larry Underwood a mumblecore rapper where he doesn't even have to sing. You can just like throw a sick beat and everyone in America will make him a chart topper. Like, that's all he has to do.
It's just so weird because that's such a big deal. And it's just like they just took that aesthetic out for some reason. There's just some weird things that they're choosing to focus on and other things that are important that they're choosing not. But okay, before we wind it down, y'all, I asked you a question at the top of the show, which was, which character do you identify with most? Let me know in the chat and also let us know in the replay. But I also want to add something. Which character did you despise the most this episode? Because that seems to be what we end up talking about. So which character also did you despise the most or wasn't feeling the most in this episode? Let me know in the chat and also let us know in the replay. Thanks so much for watching, and also be sure to subscribe. But Michael, who did you identify with this episode, and who did you despise the most this episode?
This is really tough because more characters than not were more relatable to me in this one. And I know, get to the point, Michael, spit it out. But I think I relate to Ray a lot when, you know, you're trying to do a group project and then it's just everyone else is just sitting around. You're trying to like get them help. Like, yo, I'm trying to bring back democracy. I'm trying to bring back an entire country here. And like, you're vaping, you're writing a speech, and like, you're complaining all the time. So it's like, can we just, like, I'm trying to make things happen here. However, wild card here, I kind of relate to Lloyd in a way where you know, if in a post-pandemic, if we were allowed to just ransack Vegas and just have a great time, I would just do that. Devil and Satan aside, I would just be like, yeah, let's just have some fun. Let's be Johnny Depp. Let's live it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But realistically, Ray, and a character who I despise the most
in this episode
would probably be, I would probably be Harold.
Okay, you despise Harold a lot, yeah.
Harold the most, because every time he can do good, he just goes back to his worst version of a writer and just be like, rejection, this is my world, I'm going to throw everything up. Like, you know what? Yeah.
Get over it, right? Yeah.
Harold, like, just get over it.
Get over yourself, Harold.
Yeah. Can I borrow a quote from the original miniseries? You're ruining my disco.
Yes, I agree with you. In terms of a character that I identify with most, I'm going to go with Ray. For probably the similar reason you said, more so you see people kind of claiming something, but they're bullshitting. Excuse my language, but it's BS. They're BSing. That's kind of how I felt about the committee, where it's like, you guys can make all these decisions on high, and I'm the one really doing work here. And that there's a little bit of a weirdness to that. It's like, I've been the one doing for Mother Abagail and all this other stuff, yet y'all sitting here making decisions. And it's like, okay, no, what's that about? And so Ray is probably my second favorite character of this series, Ray and Tom Cullen, when it comes to it. And a character I despise the most, I guess it's a toss-up. I wasn't feeling Harold for obvious reasons, because it just seemed like, woe is me. Even I'm so oppressed, but I'm not really oppressed, just oppressed in the sense of I didn't get my way with stuff, which I feel is like where he's at. Although, like I said earlier in the series, I did feel sympathy for him. But as it progressed, seeing the chances that he had to kind of change his ways and just choosing not to, that let me lose the sympathy for him. First name, last name, wonderful name. First name, last name. In the chat is saying, I despise them all. Brent actually said earlier, Nick was who he identified with because he had to learn ASL right now in college. Good luck in college, Brent.
Yeah.
And also, noble cause. Victoria said, I hated Trashcan Man. The acting and introduction was misplaced. I identify with Tom because he is the smartest person here. For as smart as Franny is, she's still dumb enough to break a window with her elbow. I feel like Victoria, you are so good at pointing out some of the most things that we would not even notice. I love that about you. This is great. Yes, it's like, why did they choose this? People, do your research. You don't do that.
No, that's so true.
And Damon is saying in the chat, Ray cussing out the others for thinking they're special. Same difference. I agree with that with you, Damon. I hated, of course, Lloyd. The question is, he is the way his book. Is he this way in the book? Damon wants to know, is Lloyd this way in the book? And I think I'm wondering too. I like the Lloyd of the 90s version a lot better than I like this Lloyd. I think this Lloyd is just not a right-hand man. It's kind of such a stark contrast to who Flagg is. So why would he want him running the ship?
Exactly. And what made it work in the 90s version was because Lloyd is the same character who tries to betray Tony Montana in Scarface. And so he's trying to be a right-hand man to Sosa.
Yeah.
Like, spoiler alert for all you people wanting to see 1983 Scarface. But yeah, and he's like perfectly cast in the 90s version.
It worked better. I like the actor. I like this actor for what they are making him do, you know, but I just feel like with this one, it's kind of like, how can you trust this guy with anything? Why is Flagg trusting him to run anything? Does he really believe people look at this version of Lloyd and see a leader? I feel like in the 90s version, I would see that Lloyd as a leader. I would see that Lloyd as someone who I'd be like, okay, that's Flagg's guy. Because that secondary guy that walks around with them, the one that's has the black shirt and stuff.
Yeah,
he's more of who I thought Lloyd would be.
Floyd.
who then Lloyd is.
Floyd
Mayweather, yeah. But you know, I'm not feeling Lloyd. I don't despise him, but I'm not feeling him. And I just think it's a little bit of a weird characterization of such a character that's supposed to be the right-hand man of a guy like Flagg. I wonder why he trusts him. Like, his first choice was Nick, if we are going by this series. His first choice was Nick to be his right-hand man. And he goes from Nick to Lloyd? What exactly did Flagg want exactly?
You know? Very good point. A lot of questions to be desired, and I'd love to like add an addendum to like who I hate the most. The reason I hate Harold so much is because when you're in LA, you sometimes have to be roommates with writers, and Harold is the worst version of living in LA with a writer roommate. Okay. So that's why.
Yeah. Penguin is saying in the chat, hate Harold for being evil and so dumb to not realize how easy it was for Fran to break out of the basement. Right. I didn't get that either. I kind of wondered, did he decide at the last minute he didn't want to kill Franny? Because he was like, it wasn't supposed to be this way. But wasn't it? Wasn't Franny supposed to be at the house too? Like, did you not think Franny was going to be at the house? I was confused on that, you know. But then again, this was kind of twisted to make it so that they had that confrontation anyway. So
incels don't really think with use critical thinking at the right moments.
Yeah. And Matt C is saying Julie is controlling Lloyd. I do agree with that. And that's a very interesting aspect too, because in the 90s version, we didn't see Julie as much. We saw her a little bit. We saw that she went to Vegas, but we're definitely seeing a lot more Julie playing a part of the inner circle with Flagg in this one, which is interesting, I think. But at the same time, is it necessary given that there's other characters who are not getting as much play?
It's wild the more you think about it, about Vegas, because like put our own pandemic into perspective. It's like, I bet not everybody in Vegas after watching this twice is actually there for Flagg. There might be some
people are going there because they want to be in Vegas. They think it's a chill place. That's that. They like it more than Boulder.
Not everyone's evil in Vegas, and that's what I really like about this one.
Yeah, not everyone's. I mean, some people are just there to work. Yeah, I mean, I think that was also kind of showing in the 90s one too, that some people were just there to work. They got along to get along in a way. So that's very similar. But I think so far, people are still feeling like the series is a bit of a mixed bag, and it's you know, I hope we see a bit more Flagg. I hope that maybe they'll wind down the Harold plot line, because I feel like they really let him dominate this miniseries, and I don't think that was the best choice. I think it's fine that he was such a central character. I just don't think he should have been as central as he was at the expense of the other characters.
Yeah.
So, do you have any predictions for the next episode that aren't spoilery?
The new one, I'm not really sure where it's going to go. I'm interested into more David Blaine tricks from Randall Flagg, and I'm wondering if stuff in the miniseries that they kind of dragged out, if they're going to like interlope it and kind of put it on top of each other, as opposed to like maybe a character getting killed off won't necessarily. You know, they'll try to. I think they'll make it more immediate as opposed to the 90s version. And they seem to be upping the stakes. I'm wondering, since Harold, we all know, is the bad guy, and there's only 9 episodes. I'm like, how are they gonna do this? Like, what is Harold's end game going to be? Like, how far is Harold going to get?
They better not change it. They better not. Yeah. He needs to go the same way he goes. I don't want no remix of Harold. I really don't. That's the one thing I want. I hope they keep with it. And so that's not something I want to change at all.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, they might, depending on what these writers seem to really be hard up for Harold. And, you know, Brent saying Nick joining Flagg would have been interesting. You would feel for him, obviously, because of the fact he's deaf, but also would be working for Flagg, not something played around in movies and TV shows. Yeah, I think sometimes with characters like that, they play it safe because of this idea that you don't want to step on toes and project a character being evil or something. But I think it's like let them be the different, it's not a monolith, right? That would have been somewhat interesting to see that kind of remix. And so I agree with you on that. That would have been an interesting twist. For me, I hope, I heard that Stephen King wrote the final episode, wrote this to expand it. So I think we may be seeing maybe an expansion because I feel like they have to. I just don't see this getting wrapped up in 3 episodes in the next 3 episodes in a satisfying way. Given how much it took to get to this point in episode 6, I would be really hard pressed for them to be able to carry this off in 3 episodes and for the audience to be satisfied.
Exactly, or to make sense. There's just, if you think about it, you got 3 hours left to wrap this up.
And now, mind you, the 90s series did it, and they did it well.
They did.
But I feel like they kind of wrote themselves in a corner here, focusing on certain characters way longer than they needed to. So
yeah.
But yeah, let us know in the chat, y'all. What are you thinking? Do you think they're going to be able to finish what we see in the novel in the rest of this season? Or do you think they're going to kind of give us a twist and give us a season 2 to explore other characters or maybe expand a part 2 that Stephen King is working on? Let us know in the chat. Also, finish letting us know in the chat and the replay, who do you identify with more? Who did you despise this episode? Maybe who did you despise this whole season thus far? I mean, I'm sure there's some of you who have a couple. And so, yeah, and thank you so much for joining us today. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and also turn on the notifications so that you know when we post. Whenever I post my new videos, I do these videos. Damon Robinson, my brother, is actually in the chat. Y'all have been talking to him. He's been attending these. He and I do WandaVision. For those of you who are watching WandaVision from Disney Plus, we do that every Saturday. And I will also be doing season 3 of Charmed, starting this Sunday, and I'll be doing reviews of that. So check that out. Also, let us know how you're feeling this and any other thoughts, anything you can stand out and point out to us, because I think there's a lot that's missing and a lot that they're adapting. It's all mixed up. So let us know in the replay and in the chat what your thoughts are. Oh, yeah. And thanks so much for joining us today. And let's continue to get creepy together, y'all.
Yeah, thank you. And also check out WandaVision. It is a really good show, and Chauncey and Damon do a fantastic job giving it justice. So it is worth it.
Night, y'all.
Good night.